Welcome to another episode of By the Horns. Today I spoke to Kauerauf, a regenerative farmer from the KZN Midlands, who's also a Bitcoiner. We discussed how Andre got into farming, what drives him to operate the way he does, and how Bitcoin fixes the final missing piece of regenerative ag, which is how to store your value once you've repaired the land and produce high quality food. Andre is filling a vital part of our food production system, that being working with nature rather than against it, to produce high quality food while improving the state of the land. Furthermore, he's creating networks of individuals who buy the food directly from the farmer, which improves the relationship that humans have with the food. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Bitvice, the ultimate platform in South Africa to buy Bitcoin directly to your own self-custody. If you're worried about the state of the economy and the actions taken by the South African government, or the decreasing value of your savings due to rising inflation, then maybe you should consider diversifying your assets. Did you know that Bitcoin can help de-risk your portfolio by eliminating political risk? As a global asset, Bitcoin operates independently from central banks and governments, allowing you to save and transact without anyone's permission. Authoritarian governments all over the world have tried impotently to stop Bitcoin, and none of them have succeeded. From China to Nigeria to Iran, Bitcoin has acted as a safe haven for citizens to securely store their value in the most adversarial conditions. If you want to take control of your financial future, head over to bitvice.io to discover how to set up your own self-custody wallet today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to By the Horns, a Bitcoin podcast about South Africa. And today I'm joined by a special guest relative to horns and cows, Andre Kauerauf from Bromley Farms. Andre, welcome.
Ricky, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Great to have you, man. And this is a topic I've been wanting to speak to someone about for a long time. I see in America, in Texas, they've started the Texas Beef Initiative. And you started something similar in South Africa. And maybe we should reverse back a bit for people who don't know. You're a beef farmer based in the Midlands and KZN and are a Bitcoiner. And this is a very interesting discussion. I can't wait to get into it. But yeah, welcome, man.
Thank you. Yeah, beef's one of our sort of primary enterprises. We also produce pasture-raised eggs, free-range pork, and chicken. Just to complement the beef.
Okay, great. So before we get into your agricultural practice, how did you get into Bitcoin?
So probably similar to most people's journey. It's sort of, you've heard about it for a long time and didn't really think much of it. In 2017, I think there was a big bull market. So, everybody and their uncle was buying Bitcoin and altcoins and the rest of it. And my wife and I decided we'd buy a whole 2,000 rands worth of Bitcoin at the time, just to be, part of the trend. For us, there was a lot of money back then because we were just starting our farm and we didn't have any spare money whatsoever. Then I forgot about it because it kind of blew over. I never looked into how it technically works. I didn't understand the problem that it solves. So that for me kind of came first. I first had to fully understand the problem that we have before you understand why Bitcoin is the solution. But 5 years into running a farm business, the problems that we face become very, very evident. So fast forward to 2020, I think it was. I've been following Jordan Peterson since his sort of rise to fame. Obviously, that resonated with a lot of people my age. His books. He subsequently started a podcast as well, and then all of a sudden he had Safedine Amoos on his podcast. And I've never heard of Safedine before, but anyway, it was on the Jordan Peterson podcast. So I thought, well, this is worth listening to. I listened to all the rest of them, so may as well give it a go. And yeah, during that podcast is when the penny dropped. I remember I was mowing the lawn, listening to this funny economist with a strange accent going on about the pitfalls of gold and stock to flow ratio and his usual phrases. And then it kind of all made sense. It was like, well, this is kind of at the root of all the challenges that we're facing in the business world, on from the farming side, from a food health point of view. It all makes sense. So that is, I think, when I started to really understand the technology and its implications. Obviously, then when I read the Bitcoin standard and the fiat standard, and that just clarified things even better and sort of fleshed out the bones of my understanding. But I'm still very new, so I'm probably about 2.5 years into my Bitcoin journey, and there's still a lot of things and technical terminology that I have no idea what's going on when they when guys like you probably start talking. But anyway, for me, what matters is this something I can store value in, store my time in, and store living energy in a digital form, and as a bonus, really, you can transact with it as well. So yeah.
Yeah, man, that's it's great to see the crossover, because a lot of people get to Jordan Peterson through Bitcoin, and a lot of Jordan Peterson is kind of reaching, yeah, and vice versa, right? So like you got introduced to Safe by Jordan Peterson, and Safe has introduced a lot of Bitcoiners to Jordan Peterson as well. So it's a very interesting crossover, and this is where I think things get really interesting, especially in South Africa. Is how do we bridge this gap between Bitcoiners and everyone else? Because eventually everyone's going to be a Bitcoiner, right? If we believe in hyper Bitcoinization, and that's why I'm so interested to chat to you about the farming side of things, because there's so much crossover between regenerative agriculture, which is what you're doing, and Bitcoin, which is like low time preference, applied to kind of everything. Do you want to give us a bit of a background on your farming practice and what regenerative agriculture is?
Okay, so regenerative agriculture, you can think about it being the opposite to conventional farming, where conventional farming is more akin to mining than really farming, because you're extracting more life, more resources out of your land than you're putting back in. Regenerative regenerative agriculture, it's a bit of a mouthful, but regen ag for short, is about putting more life back into your farm than there was the previous year, and therefore you should have, the more life you have, the more yield you will have. So um, it's about building topsoil. It's about increasing biodiversity. It's about increasing biomass in various different ways. There's a whole bunch of different techniques that people practice. We got into regenerative agriculture because we took over a piece of land that had never been farmed, and there's a lot of people that have sort of led the path in regenerative agriculture. One being Joel Salatin on Polyface Farms in Virginia. He's very much caters to people coming into farming, not so much about transitioning an existing farm into regenerative practices, although he's inspired those as well. But what's attractive about his model is you can start small, and it's very modular, so you can just add on as you grow your market. Joel Salatin is an educator all around. He's written a number of books, but from a business side as well. He talks about a lot of the strategies small scale farmers can take to gain market share and spread their message. So we started off with one enterprise. We were growing micro vegetables, basically baby vegetables, for restaurants and events venues around the Midlands, KZN Midlands. We then branched into raising layer chickens for eggs in a pasture raised system, which uses mobile infrastructure, mobile housing for the chickens that's moved every day onto fresh ground. Then we branched into raising meat chickens, broilers. Then we added the pigs, and then towards the end we got a herd of beef cattle in. Now, this is one of the key things with regenerative agriculture. It doesn't have to be super diversified as we are, but it's based strongly on natural law. And in the natural patterns, you'll find the more diverse things there are, the more symbiosis there is, the more life can flourish. So we're trying to stack as many enterprises, as many different animals as we can, because each of them, if they're allowed to express their unique strengths, the chicken is allowed to express its full chickenness, it can act as a net positive on your cattle enterprise, for example, because there's a whole bunch of symbiotic relationships that happen there.
So just talk me through that quickly. So if you're using on a piece of pasture, right? So you've got your chickens out there and your chicken tractors that you move around. Presumably they are pecking away and they're disturbing the top layer of the soil, and they're pooping, and so they're putting nitrates and ammonia back into the soil. How does that cycle work with your cows or your pigs, or what do you bring onto the land after the chickens have been there?
Yeah, so the chickens move every day or every second day, and they're in a rotational system on their own. The cows, being in a much bigger herd, move much faster than the chickens. So ideally what you would want is to have enough space so that you can always move the chickens 3 or 4 days behind the cattle herd. There's a lot of around that 3-4 day mark, you get a lot of the larvae hatching out of the cow manure, and the chickens love eating any form of insects. So they will not only spread the cattle manure, but they'll obviously gain the nutrition from what they're foraging. The second benefit is that they act as a dead end host. So any parasites that the cattle might leave will be attracted to the chicken, just to find that it's a dead end for them. So when the cattle come back through for a second rotation over that piece of land, the chickens have effectively sanitized that piece of land, and you decrease your parasite load by a huge factor.
Okay, so this is how the regenerative agriculture differs so much from conventional agriculture, right? So if you were conventionally growing broiler chickens or egg chickens, you'd have them cooped up in a internal space, never going outside, and you would have to use antibiotics to control for the parasites and for the bugs they're going to be getting. And the same goes for your cows in a feedlot. So I take it none of your animals, they're all pasture-reared, none of them are sitting in cages. How does your antibiotic regimen compare to what you would have to use if you were farming conventionally?
So we do use antibiotics, but the key difference is that they are not in routine use. So when we see a sickness or an illness in an animal, and sort of as a last resort, we'll treat with antibiotics. The key is that it's not a routine thing, because in a conventional system, you can't afford to lose production until you realize, oh, hang on, there's a problem. So to mitigate that, there's certain illnesses and diseases that just occur by the fact of the animals being in confinement and being around, not being able to move away from their manure. So just that's going to happen no matter what. So to mitigate that, they're just constantly on antibiotics to keep them alive long enough until slaughter date. So we rely on we rely very little on antibiotic use. We will treat an animal, I'd say maybe 3 times a year. We'd have to use an antibiotic on an animal. If it's in one of our breeding animals, we would mark that animal to mark it to be culled, because we want to have genetics on our farm that are resilient naturally, because these things are, because farm or livestock have been bred with the use of antibiotics and dewormers and these sorts of things. Their natural ability, their natural strength to resist them, there's been no natural selection, put it that way. So they come onto our farm if they haven't been born here with already a weakness bred into them. And if we can mimic that natural selection process, we'll get stronger and stronger animals over time. Whereas in conventional agriculture, the reliance on pharmaceuticals and for like antibiotics is increasing year on year, not decreasing.
Okay, so that sounds great, and obviously this is the reason why you're doing this is to look after the environment. We've only got one Earth, and you'd rather not be destroying the Earth if you have a choice. But secondly, there's a demand for this kind of product, right? People are looking for food that is pasture raised, that doesn't have excessive amounts of antibiotics in it. The animals are treated humanely. Was that, and this is kind of a segue into the next question, did you grow up on a farm, or did you get into farming, how would I say? Most people get into farming because they grew up on a farm and their parents are farmers. By the sounds of it, you went and bought some land and started farming, not because it was a family pursuit.
Yeah, 100%. So I came into farming via food, not because I was born into farming. So I was actually working in networking and IT, and doing a lot of work in remote areas. And towards the end of my career in that industry, I was dealing a lot with solar power and off-grid systems, just to try and keep networking equipment working in remote sites. So I sort of followed that passion for a little while, and at the time, I was, the sort of carbon dioxide worry about greenhouse gases and everything like that. That narrative was quite strong. And I was convinced, like everybody, that basically if everybody just converted to solar power, like all of the world's problems would be solved straight away. And that was partly why we moved on to the property we're on now, because the idea was to get off grid, grow our own food, and how hard can that be? But the problem is, people think you get off grid, you get off the electrical grid. That's great. You're not off the food grid. You're not off the whatever road network grid. You rely on a lot more than your electrical energy demands. So my wife and I first got into the idea of what's in the sausage, firstly, and how's the sausage made, because of the whole low carb movement, Tim Noakes, that whole thing. We were on a low carb diet for quite a while. We saw quite dramatic changes in our health in a short period of time, and that's when we finally realized that the food that we were eating that's labeled healthy or natural or low fat and all of that in the supermarket was actually the opposite. It was actually making us less healthy and more fat. So I was driven by the idea that regenerative agriculture can aid carbon sequestration, which is great. I mean, the carbon cycle is a very important thing, but I'd say the predominant driver was being in control of our food, being in control of where it comes from, how it's grown, how it's produced, all the way from start to finish. It just so happened that we couldn't find anyone producing that nearby, so we thought we'd do it ourselves. But to do that in an economic way, you have to produce enough excess that you can sell. So next thing we knew, we were in the farming business, and that's just taken off.
Sure. That's a pretty cool origin story. And you know, it ties in quite well to like the whole don't trust, verify Bitcoin, uh, like kind of thesis, which is go and do it yourself, really. So I love it. You know, you can't find good foods, you go and grow it yourself. Makes perfect sense. I do want to put you on the spot slightly though now. Since you've been doing regenerative agriculture and since you got into Bitcoin, how's your view on solar and the whole carbon story? Has it changed at all, or are you still of the same view as what you were a few years ago?
Um, I'm less hysterical about, and I don't feel any more urgency about me particularly having to make a difference in the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. Like I said, sort of become a secondary thing that you know we are we're creating the conditions for more life and for life to flourish. Um, in effect, um, not taking part in an inflationary production farming model, but rather in a deflationary model. And um, the fact that we sequestering more carbon than we producing is just a great bonus to have. For me, solar though, my opinion and my view on the solar as a technology hasn't changed. I didn't. I was seeing firsthand when I started with working with the systems that um, this was something that could generate power and work reliably, regardless of what it meant for the environment or climate change. The more urgent matter was that our grid was becoming more and more unreliable. In rural areas, we the infrastructure, the Eskom infrastructure is so badly degraded that on top of load shedding, we have regular 24, 48-hour outages just because of the lines fall down. A tree that hasn't been cut, damages the line, or it's just lack of maintenance. So to me, it's still the number one um, way that a individual can take control of their power generation. Um, and I mean, for the price of a medium, small to medium brand new car, you can have your own power station at your house, and you don't have to worry about the maintenance on the lines, uh, failures at the local substation, corruption at the nearest power station, and all the international shenanigans that are going on. So to me, that's for South Africans. I think that's what we should be focusing on.
Man, that's beautifully put. I couldn't agree with you more. The the discussion I see happening, and Safety points this out quite well. You can't run an industrialized society on solar, but that's not what we're trying to achieve in South Africa. We're trying to decentralize ourselves from the electricity grid. We're trying to get away from a centralized energy production system, and solar happens to be the most cost-effective way that us as individuals can reliably get ourselves away from that grid. So solar makes a lot of sense there. You can't run a smelter or a factory on it, but you can definitely run your house and a farm something that's not using a lot of huge amounts of energy. You can run that on solar, and especially in South Africa where we've got so much sun, it does make a lot of sense. So yeah, it's refreshing to see like a sober take on it though, because often it's the solar thing has become like almost like a religion as well, where people think they pursue this net zero dream, which is kind of anti-human, but you're just using it as a tool to really remove your reliance on Eskom, which is extremely unreliable. Okay, so on to the next one. Let's talk about beef. So, what type of cows are you raising, and how does this interact with Bitcoin?
Yeah, so beef, we raise entirely pure Angus beef, Angus cows. Our neighbor happens to be a very good Angus breeder, so we in the fortunate position that we basically take all of his excess stock that he either can't market, or he normally grows his a few extra animals as replacement breeding animals, and then he'll select out of a group of 100 his replacements, and then give us the rest. So, and then we just walk them across the boundary, and they then basically grown out and finished on our farm. So to grass finish, raise an animal entirely on grass and finish it is quite a difficult thing. And if anyone knows much about growing beef on grass purely, you can start to quickly see why the whole idea with feedlots came about, because in a feedlot you get a young animal fat quickly. It's very unhealthy by the time it gets processed. But the fact that it's a young animal when it is processed means the meat is quite tender, or relatively tender. So now you don't have to worry about the whole aging process, which is the original method of getting a older meat tender. You have a young animal where the meat's still tender; it can go straight in the pack and on the shelves and be sold. So there's a lot of gain in efficiency there. If maximum profit, maximum production and output is your what you want to achieve. What you don't get is any flavor. So the meat is very pale. There's a lot of fat, but it's white fat. It's people can argue, whether feedlot beef is still healthier to eat than no meat at all, and I probably would agree with them. But that's not what we're about. We want to raise cattle on grass, finish them on grass. That takes a lot longer. It almost takes twice as long to finish an animal. So obviously you have twice the amount of input costs to raise the animal. You need, you only have so much space, so that's taken up for a longer period of time. When we finish it, we finish it as best as we can on planted and perennial forage that's available at that time of year. Now we have our rainy season is in summer and a very dry winter, so there's hardly any growth. We have frost in winter. We go down to -7 pretty much every morning for June and July. So the grass goes dormant. Your animals you can basically just maintain, and but you're not gaining muscle, you're not gaining fat during those winter months. So that means our production becomes seasonal as well, because we're not going to process an animal that's not finished in the middle of winter. We have to then wait until spring and try and stock up throughout the summer so that we have enough to get us through winter. The meat will be much leaner. There is still fat, but it'll be yellow fat, because they're not eating grains, they're eating grass. The meat will be much darker, and the color of the meat, of any meat, whether it's chicken or pork or beef, doesn't matter. The more color it has, generally the more nutrient dense that piece of meat is. And we dry age our animals, so minimum 14 days, usually between 14 and 21 days we dry age them. It means the meat is absolutely tender and delicious, just like it would be from a young animal, but the animal is much older. And then you don't have as much shrinkage in your meat either, because the moisture is lost in the cold room while it's hanging, while it's aging for 14 days. So you cook that mince or you cook that steak, you retain 95% of the original weight, whereas you buy fast grown young meat in the supermarket, you can lose 30-40% in weight in the extreme cases.
Yeah, especially with chicken. They love brining
Yeah.
chicken and injecting it with salt water, and you end up cooking away half your weight. So you're buying water. Not
Yeah.
only are you buying something that's laden with antibiotics and hormones, but it's full of salt water too, just to add insult to injury.
Yeah.
So you guys take quality seriously. Everything you're doing is about preserving the quality of the food, and improving the quality of your land. So you've got a more productive farm over time. Have you found that your input costs have not increased as much as your neighboring farmers who farm conventionally have over the last 2 years or 3 years with the inflation we've seen?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the main benefits with regenerative agriculture. Is the idea is you're lowering your input costs year on year, because you're allowing natural processes, which you can maybe elaborate on in the soil. The more diversity you have growing above the soil, the more diversity you have below the soil, and everything starts kicking into higher gear, and you're actually starting to capture nitrogen out of the atmosphere rather than having to apply synthetic nitrogen. We've never bought a bag of synthetic fertilizer in our lives, and that's been a real blessing. We obviously have a lot of chicken manure from where we rotate the chickens. We can plant cover crops in there without any planting fertilizer whatsoever, and we get amazing growth. But that's obviously to be expected. With the cattle, we practice high density rotational grazing, which firstly it does improve the fertility in the soil, but you're also changing the species of grass that's growing from more palatable species, more diversity as well. You want grasses, you want legumes and small shrubs and all that sort of thing to all do their thing. But the input costs is the primary leverage that regenerative farmers have to gain a cost advantage and to make that extra margin, to make it sustainable as a business. Now, that's true, and everybody that, the guys that talk about that extensively, like Joel Salatin and like Gabe Brown, they go as far as that and saying this is your leverage to run a sustainable business and to become more profitable year on year. And that's all true. What I've found though is that that's not enough in its own right, because you're gaining that advantage through the reduced input costs, but the money is becoming, your purchasing power is becoming less faster year on year. So you think you're making progress, but you're not gaining. You're actually just slowing your rate of growth just by smaller negative numbers, if that makes sense.
as the Afrikaners would say, je boer achteruit. You're farming backwards. And that's because your money is going backwards. And you can be doing everything right in accordance to the regenerative theory. And you could be stashing money. You could be in the profit. And, you're putting away money every year. But if that money is not respecting your time and it is losing value itself, your entire business can be undermined. And this is where Bitcoin comes in, right? So if you're able to save 5 to 10% of your assets annually into Bitcoin, that could be enough, or could be the difference in keeping your farm afloat long term. Is this the way that you're looking at it? And is this how you incorporating Bitcoin into your practice?
100%. I'm now convinced that there is no foreseeable other way to progress into the future without having a sound, hard money to be able to convert into. If we, there's no, and this is what I'm trying to spread to other farmers as well. We are doing everything right, and it's breaking them, it's breaking their spirit, their energy to keep going, their hope, their relationships. It's breaking people, and they can see that their land is thriving, but they themselves cannot get ahead. And I feel compelled now to talk to fellow farmers and say, look, this is where we are. This is where we're going, and it's not your fault. It's not your. Farmers feel a lot of pressure to either be the one that they lost the farm, after 3, 4, 5 generations, or they risked everything to start a new farm like we did, to put everything on the line and to do everything right, and then to be kicked out of the game by not your own doing. That is that's where I'm at.
Yeah, man, it's and it's an absolutely real threat that people face every day. And like you say, it's soul destroying. You can see your life's work and your ancestors' life's work completely undermined just because your money can't act as a reliable store of value. Luckily, Bitcoin fixes this, right? And what it also does is it allows farmers to bootstrap their own energy systems on their farms too, where you can incorporate Bitcoin mining with your own energy production, be it solar or hydro or wind or whatever the guys have got available to them, generators even. You could bootstrap that with Bitcoin mining, and this is where things get really, really interesting. And that's a topic for another day. But where can Bitcoin is obviously a lot of us into pasture beef, a lot of us are into carnivore, keto at least. So where can Bitcoiners find you? How can they buy some produce from you? How can they support you?
So in the short term, our website is bramley.co.za, at Bramley Farm on Instagram or Facebook. You can, we try and be quite transparent about everything that we do. We also, we want customers to verify for themselves. Our business is built around selling direct to the end consumer. So we've become pretty good at the shipping logistics side of things. So we can get beef pretty much anywhere in the country. And obviously, it's going to be very expensive beef, but the bigger. That's why what I'm focusing on now is putting together bigger bundles that you can, maybe order once or twice, even in a season, and fill up your freezer. And I think that's going to be the most economical for me as a producer, and and the end user. What I don't want to do is become a national beef supplier. I want to encourage other grass-fed beef farmers around to look at something like the beef initiative that Texas Slim is spearheading in the US, which is basically just a directory of verified regenerative beef producers that will accept Bitcoin as payment and see the benefit of that. And there's not much to that other than just having a website, a landing page with a directory, and people can search from their area to whoever's closest. And I think there need not be any middlemen. It's about buying direct from your farmer, getting value direct from the source, and building a relationship. Our customers, we have customers, 99% of them buy from us every week because we're friends with them. We've literally become close friends and have a deep relationship with them. And I think that's missing in the food system. First of all, the next thing to go after that relationship is the authenticity and practicing what you preach or what you put on the label. If you can't, anybody can put anything on a label. If you don't know, it's just sitting on the shelf. That's all you can see. So yeah, maybe this is the start of the South African beef initiative. I hope it can be.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. And there is a monetization pathway for someone willing to put this together now that Fedimint is becoming a thing, where all of these farmers don't want to manage their own Lightning channels, because realistically you want to pay via Lightning for this. I suppose on-chain if you're buying a half cow or something, but you want someone to manage that liquidity. So having the index provider manage the liquidity, manage the channels for the farmers so they could focus on their core business, which is raising cattle and not dealing with payments, kind of solves this problem and makes it financially viable for someone to put the index together, because you'll take a portion of all the sales. So there's an idea for anyone who wants to make this happen. Andre, this is super inspirational to hear what you're doing. And I think, having farmers like yourself who really want to change the way that we produce our food, to be in accordance with nature rather than against it, it's really something that we need. And the low time preference, I think it's natural that Bitcoin and regenerative agriculture are good bedfellows. So yeah, I wish you all the best, and obviously we'll put all the links to your website, to your farm, to your Instagram. We'll put that below so people can find you. And guys, go buy half a cow for us here in Cape Town. Let's pitch together, spend some sats and buy some beef. Yeah, Andre, thank you very much for your time. Great to chat to you.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me, Ricky. It's great to finally meet, and wonderful time talking to you. And I hope it's been interesting for your listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, man. Andre, we'll see you soon.
Cheers. Bye.